What's going on, everybody? Brent Hayden here, coming at you on this Wednesday night, talking Thursday, October 25th, four-game NBA slate. Not too much to go over in this one. It is a pretty straightforward slate. Not a lot of injuries. A couple teams on back-to-back, so that'll be interesting. But before we dig in, make sure that you're hitting that subscribe button down below. That way you will get notified whenever I post a new video. And if you stumbled across this video and you're not already following me on Twitter, my Twitter handle is in the description down below, and you will definitely want to make sure that you send me a DM on Twitter to find out how you can get access to my projections and content for a very affordable one-time price. Without further ado, let's dig in and take a look at the slate. First game of the night, we have Cleveland taking on Detroit. Detroit a 7-point favorite in this one, 223.5 over under. Cleveland on a back-to-back. The only real news that we have is that Blake Griffin is probable for this one, dealing with a little bit of a toe injury. He is coming off of just a monster game against the Sixers. Put up 82 fantasy points, 50 real points, 14 rebounds. He's going to be a popular option here. I guarantee that he will have really high ownership, and that's perfectly fine in cash games if you want to roll with Blake Griffin. He is a really solid option here against a Cleveland team that is struggling against opponents in the paint. They're allowing 54.7 points in the paint per game. Opponents are shooting 43% or almost 44% from three against them. Blake obviously likes to shoot from three. They're playing somewhat fast. Their defense is terrible. Everything lines up to for Blake to be a very solid play here. In tournaments, I think you have to take a stand and fade him and hope it doesn't kill you. But in cash games, perfectly fine going with Blake Griffin there. Looking at his price over here on FanDuel at 9,200, it comes in just below Nikola Jokic for whatever reason, who is a power forward over here. But he's a good option there. I think I'm going to lean, though, in tournaments and maybe even cash games towards Andre Drummond. Drummond coming off a game where he struggled a little bit against Joel Embiid. Still, 46 fantasy points, 14 and 16 points and rebounds. Again, this is just a really good spot for these Detroit big men. Drummond actually comes in just a hair below Blake in usage. Blake is right around 31% for the season. Andre Drummond coming in at 30%. And given that Cleveland struggles to defend the roll man, this is a spot where Drummond can put up a solid game. Cleveland also really struggling at the rim. Opponents are shooting 68% at the rim against them. So I really like Andre Drummond here tonight. I'm perfectly fine if you want to take a look at Reggie Jackson. Again, efficiency has been solid for him. He's just not really doing a whole lot. And I expect those minutes to be down below, right around that 30, 32 mark here tonight. The guy that I'm going to probably have the most exposure to is Ish Smith here coming in. He's historically always been a guy that we like to target, always like a fantasy point per minute guy. 4,400 on DraftKings. He is affordable over on FanDuel as well. So I actually have a decent amount of interest in him tonight as a mid-range / value point guard option. The other guy that I do have a little bit of interest here, and this is because Cleveland really struggling against spot-up shooters and really struggling to defend the three-point line, is Reggie Bullock. We've just seen enough field goal attempts out of him, and we know what he is capable of doing, so I like Reggie Bullock as a mid-range option. On the flip side of things, Kevin Love coming off a bad game against Brooklyn. I'm going to keep riding Kevin Love here. Eventually that shot's going to start falling for him. He's going to start playing better. I like him a decent amount in the spot. Chetty Osman, someone else I have a lot of interest in. Just minutes, usage, field goal attempts for him. Really solid. So I do like Chetty Osman a decent amount in that mid-range price. Jordan Clarkson, I'm going to continue to go back to the well with him. He's just in that mid-range price tag, 4,600. Just a very good option here. High usage guy off the bench. Ranks first on the team in isolation frequency, with 13% frequency, 1 point per possession. And the Pistons, a team that are really struggling in isolation defense, so they're giving up 1.11 points per possession. So I do like Jordan Clarkson here a decent amount. If you wanted to punt with Colin Sexton, got about 25, 26 minutes last night. He's someone to consider. Just his upside has just not really been there this season. This feels like a pretty good spot for Tristan Thompson. I want to monitor the news on Larry Nance and if he's going to sit out a back-to-back or play limited minutes. Tristan Thompson in a fantastic spot here. I actually think he's going to have upside because they're going to need a big body up against Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin in the paint. So Tristan Thompson, a guy I do have a significant amount of interest in, especially in tournaments tonight. Moving on, we have Orlando and Portland. Portland heading to Orlando. Portland favored by 3 in this one, 218 over under. Shockingly enough, Orlando's defense pretty good. They have the 11th best defensive rating at 106.8 in the NBA. They are still struggling on the boards. Opponents are pulling down 51 rebounds per game against them, and their transition defense is lacking. So that leads us to a couple options from the Portland side of things. They're decent against point guards, but given how the point guard pricing is, especially over here on FanDuel, Damian Lillard comes in as a very, very good option pretty much across the board, cash games and tournaments. I do like him a decent amount. There's upside even at that price tag in this matchup, so I think he's someone that you have to consider if you're going to fade Russell Westbrook, just because at the top end there's really not a whole lot outside of him and Kyrie, and he falls in this really weird price range where he's like 2,000 cheaper than Russ and like 1,500 more expensive than Kyrie. It's just a weird price range for Lillard, so I think he actually goes overlooked. So I do like him. I'm going to be off of McCollum outside of tournaments. We know McCollum has upside from time to time, but it's kind of limited right now because pretty much all of his time is spent next to Damian Lillard. They're using Stauskas, they're using Curry, they're using Evan Turner off of the bench to do some of the ball handling, and that's really killed McCollum if he's going to be playing alongside Damian Lillard for the majority of his minutes. It's really hard for him to produce. That being said, 6,700 on FanDuel, 6,100 on DraftKings, a solid tournament option here tonight. I think this is going to be a spot. We saw Nurkic come out against the Wizards, put up a really, really solid game against a Magic team that has 2 legitimate 7-footers. This is a spot where I think Nurkic is going to get a significant amount of minutes, and he's actually second highest usage option on the team for the Trailblazers. So I have a decent amount of interest in him. Again, we know Orlando's struggling against big men as far as at least keeping them off the glass. So there's rebounding upside here for Nurkic. He's going to be a cash game option at that price, 6,700 for me. I think that price, the risk of him coming off the floor is kind of baked into that price. But again, in a matchup against 2 legitimate 7-footers, I don't see him coming off the floor too terribly much here. I like Aminu and Turner as cash options, just given their price tag. There's not a whole lot in the mid-range at forward. So both these guys. Turner, the biggest downside is that he just needs minutes. The minutes haven't been there for him. You can go back to the Stauskas as well. It's one of those, if he's hitting his shots, he's going to continue to play. If his shot isn't falling, he's not going to get the minutes. But in tournaments, feel free to roll some sauce out there. On the flip side of things, Vucevic, triple-double upside, has just been crushing so far this season. Matchup isn't great. He's not necessarily a guy that you expect to see him, back to the basket, post up big man all the time, which is something that, Portland struggles against. That being said, I think Vucevic is a perfectly fine tournament option here. And I think there's just better options in cash. You're going to get Jokic, you're going to get Drummond, you're going to get Nurkic, I think are all better options. But Vucevic, as I said, in tournaments, a perfectly fine option here. I still like Evan Fournier coming off a couple big games. He actually leads the team in usage at 25%. Portland struggling a little bit against spot-up shooters so far this season, 1.15 points per possession. Fournier, a decent spot-up shooter here, so I have a lot of interest in Evan Fournier. I also have a lot of interest in Jonathan Isaac. Isaac coming off a really solid outing his last time out against Boston. He's someone else to consider. He's another guy that can spot up pretty well, pretty efficiently. So I do have a lot of interest in Isaac. That price tag 4,400 over there on DraftKings, 55 on FanDuel, kind of fits lineup construction that I'm looking at so far. Obviously, Aaron Gordon coming down in price, which is really good to see. He's always got tournament upside, but not so when I'm forcing into my lineups tonight. Moving on, Boston heading to Oklahoma City, favored by OKC favored by 1.5 in this one too, 11.5 over under. I don't have a lot of interest in the Oklahoma City side of this game. Obviously, we know Russell Westbrook, a fantastic option if you want to roll him out, has triple-double upside, 50, 60 fantasy points is pretty much the expectation out of him. I mean, his first game without even playing in the preseason, dude comes out and drops, 58 fantasy points, 10-5 on DraftKings. Very, very tough to get away from over there. Understandable if you want to fade him over here on FanDuel at 12-5. But he's still a fantastic option. The downside, obviously, is the matchups. Not the greatest. Boston, 97.3 defensive rating so far this season. He's matchup proof though. So if you're wanting to pay up at point guard, feel free. You can roll Paul George if you really want. You can roll Steven Adams, but I'm not terribly intrigued by either of those options tonight. I think there's multiple better places to go at each position. Flipping over to the Boston side of things, Kyrie, plenty of upside at that price, 7,300. I know he's coming off, a couple down games, had a really good one against Orlando. Field goal attempts, minutes, all that stuff going to be solid for him. Usage is going to be there for him. I absolutely love him in the spot. We know Russell Westbrook not great on the defensive end. OKC's defense has struggled a bit to start the season. So I have a lot of interest in Kyrie. Kyrie at 7,300. Just too cheap. It's just one of those things where you just kind of have to play him as a price play. Even at 7,700, it's really hard to get away from him over on FanDuel. I know Jaylen Brown has been putrid, absolutely putrid to start the season, but he's down to like 5,100 over here on DraftKings. He's still a little bit more expensive over on FanDuel at 5K, so he's down to 5K there. He's going to have a huge game at some point. Like, it's going to happen. He's going to go off. He's not going to continue to shoot like absolute garbage and whatnot. So Jaylen Brown, a guy I'm going to have a lot of exposure to today. I'm going to keep playing him until he goes off. It just comes down to that. Like, at some point, you just have to keep on locking this guy in because he has 30 plus, 40 plus fantasy point upside. He just hasn't shown it yet. So I love Jaylen Brown in this spot. Again, OKC's defense not that great so far to start the season. Struggling in isolation. They're struggling on spot ups. They're letting opponents light them up from three. So there's a couple areas where Jaylen Brown pretty solid. Is one of the better spot up shooters in the league last year. So I do like him a decent amount. And of course, Jason Tatum, still a fantastic high upside option if you want to roll him out in cash or tournaments. Gordon Hayward at 5,500, more of a tournament option, going to draw a lot of, Paul George defense. That kind of concerns me, so I'm probably looking elsewhere in that price range. And the same goes with Al Horford, just not somewhere I really want to go tonight. Moving on to the last game of the night. This is the one that everyone's going to want to target. So this is going to be the good one. This is Denver at LA. We have Denver 4-point favorites, 239 over under in this one. Lakers going into last night's slates. I'm recording this before that game is even tipped off, but Lakers going into that game, a 117.2 defense rating, 108.72 pace, struggling in the paint. Opponents are scoring almost 53 points in the paint against them. Opponents are pulling down like 52 rebounds a game against them. Opponents are shooting 41.1% from three against them. I have the most interest in this game from the Denver side of things. I'll get to the Lakers in a second, but given Denver just has so much upside in the spot, all these guys have the potential to put up really, really solid games. Nikola Jokic, lock. He's a lock for me. Like, I'm just not going to fade Jokic here. I mean, we know that the potential he has. I mean, he put up over 40 fantasy points in 23 minutes against the Kings. Like, as long as he plays 30 minutes, which this game stays close, he will. he's got 50, 60, 70 fantasy point upside. So I refuse to fade Jokic even on like FanDuel where he's a power forward. It's just one of those, he goes in my lineup like first things first. So Jokic a lock for me tonight, or yeah, tonight. Um, Gary Harris, another guy, just going to be pretty much a lock for me. Um, just massive production lately. Without Barton, he's been so much better. 26 minutes, 32 fantasy points. He can get you the steals, rebounds, can shoot. I mean, he's shooting really well recently. So Gary Harris, another guy, is just going to go straight in my lineup first thing first. Like those two guys I'm going to be building around for sure. I love Millsap again in this spot. All these guys have potential to put up solid games. Millsap 22 minutes last game out, 27 fantasy points. Like really good spot for Millsap, and even Jamal Murray. Like Jamal Murray coming down to 5,900. Put up a really good game last time out too. Everybody in this Denver lineup had good outings. They just played limited minutes against the Kings, and it's going to be like that I think for the rest of the time that Barton's out. Like all these guys are just going to put up really solid fantasy games. So I have no issue stacking Denver in this spot. Like Jamal Murray, Gary Harris, using Nikola Jokic. If you want to fade like Murray to go with like Juancho Hernan-Gomez, you can definitely do that. Even Torrey Craig, we know the minutes, are going to be in the mid 20s for him. Just not a lot of upside, but at that price, 3,800, kind of tough to get away from on DraftKings. What is he over here on FanDuel? He is 3,800, so perfectly fine using him there. I like the upside that Trey Lyles has. He's just a little bit too pricey for me. But Juancho Hernan-Gomez, I mean, we saw it last game, 25 minutes. Some of that was blowout, of course, but he has potential. So Hernan-Gomez, the guy that I have the most interest in as far as a value play goes. On the flip side of things, I'm down on the Lakers in this spot, obviously coming in on a back-to-back. I would have a little bit of concern about Lonzo Ball's minutes tonight. There's obviously the potential that he either sits out or plays limited minutes. So we need to make sure we monitor the news for that. But like Denver's defense has been really good. They have a 97.3 defensive rating. They're one of the best rebounding teams in the NBA. So I don't want to pick on them too much, but we're going to have to at least a couple spots, I think. So if you want to take LeBron James, it's LeBron freaking James. He's matchup proof, perfectly fine. Use rolling him out in any format. Again, I mentioned Lonzo. He's fine. A guy you're not really counting on him for the scoring. It's more of the peripheral stats for him, and the triple double upside that he has. Again, biggest concern I have with him is it's a back to back. We need to make sure that Walton's not going to sit him or limit his minutes. If something were to come out and he were to miss this game or play limited minutes, that's going to open up Lance Stevenson, who would be one of the better value plays on the slate. I do expect JaVale McGee to play a significant amount of minutes here. He has to play a decent amount of minutes to match up with Nikola Jokic. He could get in foul trouble, so that would be a little concerning, but I do like McGee a decent amount here. If you're building multiple lineups, definitely take some shots on Zubac or Jonathan Williams. We saw Williams get the run whenever McGee fouled out against the Spurs. Williams would be a guy that I would have some interest in if I was building a lot of GPP lineups. Josh Hart, I still like even at that $6,200 price tag. Still has plenty of upside. Kuzma is the guy that I'm kind of off of, just at that $7,400 price tag. It's a little too pricey for me, especially in this matchup. But if you're wanting to get exposure to the Lakers or you're going to have a bunch of Nuggets, you kind of need to have someone from the Lakers in your lineup. So I would lean either like LeBron or Hart or Kuzma and Hart or something like that. So definitely just it's more you're gonna have to keep an eye on the news to make sure that Lonzo is not limited in this game. But yeah, that does it. That's the entire slate. Just 4 games. Pretty straightforward slate. Not too terribly much to go over, but just make sure you're monitoring the news, and I will keep everyone in the Discord up to date if anything changes. Good luck tonight.